The Crusades, 1096 and 1221 AD. The Holy Wars that changed the world. They came bearing the cross, and the Crescent rose to meet them. For 200 years, faith and fire consumed the world. Between 1096 and 1291, Europe and the Middle East were locked in a war unlike any other. Not for land or gold, but for the soul of the world. Kings, knights, monks, and peasants marched under the sign of the cross, believing they fought for God. Across the desert, the warriors of Islam rose to defend their faith, their cities, and their civilization. What followed were the Crusades, a series of holy wars that reshaped continents, faiths, and history itself. This is their story, told through the eyes of both Cross and Crescent. Chapter 1. The Road to War, 1071-1095. The roots of the Crusades lay not in piety alone, but in fear. In 1071 AD, the Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of Rome, suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Manzikert. The Seljuk Turks, fierce Muslim warriors from Central Asia, shattered the Byzantine army and seized most of Anatolia, today's Turkey. The ancient empire was collapsing. The Byzantine emperor, desperate and humiliated, sent a plea westward to the Pope in Rome. He begged for soldiers to help reclaim the lands of Christ and protect Christian pilgrims who could no longer safely reach Jerusalem. In 1095, that call reached Pope Urban II. At a council in Clermont, France, he rose before a crowd of knights and peasants and delivered one of the most electrifying speeches in history. Deus vult. God wills it. He called upon the warriors of Christendom to march east, to free the Holy Sepulchre from Muslim control, and to earn forgiveness for their sins. The crowd erupted. Thousands took the cross, sewing its symbol onto their clothes. An army of faith was born. Chapter 2. The First Crusade, 1096 and 1099. The First Crusade began not with kings, but with the common people. A fiery preacher named Peter the Hermit led tens of thousands of peasants, men, women, even children, across Europe. They were untrained, unarmed, and utterly unprepared. Along the way, they looted and massacred Jewish communities in the Rhineland, a tragedy that foreshadowed centuries of intolerance. When they finally reached Anatolia, the Turks annihilated them. The People's Crusade ended in disaster. But behind them came the real army, led by nobles like Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, and Bohemond of Taranto. This was no mob. It was a coalition of hardened knights, driven by faith and ambition. They crossed the Bosporus, defeated the Turks at Dorylaeum, and marched deep into Syria. By 1098, they captured Antioch after a brutal siege, one of the bloodiest in medieval history. Inside the city, starving crusaders discovered what they believed was the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side. Their faith reignited, they slaughtered the defending army and pressed on. The Siege of Jerusalem, 1099. When they reached Jerusalem, only 12,000 of the original 60,000 remained. The city, held by the Fatimid Egyptians, stood behind massive walls. The Crusaders marched barefoot in penance around its walls, praying for victory. After weeks of siege, on July 15, 1099, they breached the defenses. What followed was carnage. Muslim and Jewish inhabitants were massacred. The streets ran red with blood. The Crusaders wept with joy and horror, believing they had fulfilled God's will. They established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, with Godfrey as its ruler. Church bells rang across Europe. The impossible had happened. The Holy City was back in Christian hands, but the war had only just begun. Chapter 3. The Age of the Crusader States, 1100–1144. The First Crusade's victory created 4 fragile states in the Middle East. the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Tripoli, the Kingdom of Jerusalem. These were Christian islands in a Muslim sea. To survive, they relied on constant reinforcements from Europe and uneasy truces with local Muslim rulers. Trade and diplomacy flourished. Even coexistence was possible. But peace was an illusion. To the Muslim world, the Crusaders were invaders, foreign occupiers of sacred lands. And as the generations passed, a new spirit of resistance began to rise. Chapter 4. The Fall of Edessa and the Second Crusade, 1144-1149. In 1144, disaster struck. The Muslim leader Zengi, ruler of Aleppo, captured the city of Edessa, the first Crusader state to fall. Its loss sent shockwaves through Europe. The Pope called for a new crusade, and this time, kings answered. Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany led vast armies east, but arrogance and poor planning doomed them. They were crushed in Anatolia, betrayed by allies, and repelled at Damascus. The Second Crusade ended in humiliation. It taught Europe that the East was not theirs to take, and taught the Muslims that unity could win. And unity was coming. Chapter 5. The Rise of Saladin, 1169-1187. From the chaos rose one of history's greatest leaders, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known in the West as Saladin. Born in Tikrit, raised in Damascus, Saladin served the Fatimid Caliphate before uniting the Muslim world under his command. He was devout, just, and merciful, yet fierce in battle. He dreamed of reclaiming Jerusalem, not through slaughter, but through destiny. By 1187, Saladin led a vast army of Egyptians, Syrians, and Kurds against the Crusaders. At the Battle of Hattin, near the Sea of Galilee, he trapped the Crusader army in the heat of summer. The Christians, parched and surrounded, broke under his assault. The true cross, their most sacred relic, was captured. Jerusalem lay defenseless. The fall of Jerusalem. On October 2, 1187, Saladin entered Jerusalem. Unlike the Crusaders of 1099, he showed mercy. He forbade looting and massacre, allowing Christians to ransom themselves and leave in peace. Even his enemies admired him. From England to Damascus, his name became legend. The chivalrous conqueror who outshone the kings of Europe. But Europe would not forgive. The fall of Jerusalem would ignite the greatest crusade of them all. Chapter 6. The Third Crusade, 1189-1192. The King's Crusade. The Third Crusade brought together the most powerful monarchs of the West: Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor. It was the mightiest army Europe had ever sent east. But fate intervened. Barbarossa drowned while crossing a river in Anatolia. His army dissolved. Philip quarreled with Richard and returned home. The burden fell to one man, Richard I of England. Richard versus Saladin. Richard was bold, brilliant, and utterly relentless. He captured Acre after a brutal siege, personally leading assaults and duels. When Muslim envoys delayed ransom payments, he executed 2,700 prisoners, a shadow over his legend. At the Battle of Arsuf, Richard's disciplined knights smashed Saladin's cavalry, proving that the Crusaders still had power. But Jerusalem remained elusive. Neither side could hold it without risking total collapse. In 1192, exhausted and ill, both men agreed to peace. Jerusalem would remain under Muslim rule, but Christian pilgrims could visit safely. Richard and Saladin never met face to face, but their mutual respect became immortal. Two lions, one of the cross, one of the crescent, had fought to a standstill. Chapter 7. The Later Crusades, 1202-1291. The Third Crusade marked the high point. What followed was decline. Crusades driven less by faith and more by greed and politics. The Fourth Crusade, 1201 to 1204, the shame of Christendom. Instead of marching to Jerusalem, Crusaders turned their swords against Constantinople, the greatest Christian city in the East. Manipulated by Venetian merchants, they sacked the Byzantine capital in 1204, looting its treasures, burning its churches, and slaughtering its people. The crusade, meant to defend Christianity, had destroyed its greatest city. The East never forgave the West. The Fifth and Sixth Crusades, 1217 to 1244. Later crusades tried to regain momentum, attacking Egypt instead of Palestine. For a time, they achieved miracles. The Sixth Crusade, under Frederick II, actually reclaimed Jerusalem peacefully through diplomacy. But it was temporary. In 1244, the city fell again, this time to the Khwarezmians, allies of the Egyptian Mamluks. Jerusalem was lost for good. The Seventh and Eighth Crusades, the end. The French king, Louis IX, later canonized as Saint Louis, led two final crusades. Both ended in disaster, one in Egypt, the other in Tunisia, where the king himself died of disease in 1270. By the time the last Crusader stronghold, Acre, fell in 1281, 2 centuries of holy war had come to an end. The dream of a Christian Holy Land was over. Chapter 8. The Legacy of the Crusades. The Crusades failed in their ultimate goal. Jerusalem remained under Muslim rule, but their impact was vast and permanent. They reconnected East and West after centuries of isolation. Trade flourished, bringing silk, sugar, and ideas from the Islamic world to Europe. The Crusaders brought back not just relics, but knowledge, mathematics, medicine, architecture, sparking the first flickers of the Renaissance. Yet they also left scars. Centuries of mistrust between Christians and Muslims, East and West, were born on those battlefields. Cities were destroyed, innocents slaughtered, faith corrupted by ambition. The holy wars revealed humanity at its best and its worst. Courage and cruelty intertwined. Chapter 9. The Lasting Memory. In the centuries that followed, poets, monks, and warriors turned the Crusades into legend. The names Jerusalem, Hattin, and Acre became symbols of faith, of loss, of destiny. For Muslims, it was a time of resistance and unity. For Europeans, it was the first taste of global war. Both sides remembered, and those memories shaped the modern world. They marched for God, they fought for kings, but they died for something far greater, the idea that faith could move armies. The Crusades were not a single story of victory or defeat. They were the moment when two worlds met in blood, faith, and flame, and when humanity learned that heaven is never won by the sword,